I've got something I want to play for you.
Lolita. Light of my life, fire of my loins. These are the opening lines to Vladimir Nabokov's 20th century classic about a middle-aged academic who falls in love with a 12-year-old girl. This epic of obsession, published in 1955, was brought to the silver screen first by Stanley Kubrick in 1962 and second in 1997 by English film director Adrian Lyne. It is the latter production which is currently on Mubi, but we're going to take a more holistic view of the Lolita narrative and its various incarnations. So, of that narrative, our perverted protagonist, Professor Humbert Humbert, first sets eyes on Lolita, or Lo for short, during a house viewing. He ends up moving in and marrying the landlady to get closer to her daughter. Lolita's mother throws herself into oncoming traffic upon discovering Humbert's private journal and his true intentions, conveniently leaving Humbert free to pursue his transgressive tryst, a coercive love affair masquerading as an intimate father-daughter bond. But it's not the curiosity of concerned onlookers that catches Humbert out, but a fellow predator, Claire Quilty, a shadowy playwright who snatches Lolita, leaving Humbert heartbroken and hungry for blood. You're listening to MoobTube, a safe haven for soft boy cineasts. Owen, let's begin with the 1997 version. Did this new Lo light up your loins?
Spoken like a master. And it's weird, because even though we're talking about 1997, I want to talk about Lolita as a cultural artifact, which is important not to lose sight of, because that's what it's become.
Yeah.
You know, everywhere from like Harajuku in Japan to like, you know, a handbag or whatever. It's kind of it's so prevalent in our culture, and our idea of perhaps the wrong thing. The problem with Lolita is that it was written and has kind of been subjected to half a century of misreadings. Kind of often quite suggestive and quite weird misreadings, and a lot of that comes down to, I think, our failure, and it's something I think we'll talk about, but our failure to kind of can understand Humbert as a problematic and untrustworthy narrator. And this 1997 film came after Kubrick's 60s effort. A film that was actually written by Nabokov, Nabokov was involved in the screenplay for the original. Kind of fresh, hot off the heels of him actually writing the book. It had a very tortured publication history, was banned multiple times for different reasons. France has a very complicated relationship with kind of allowing certain books and not. So Ulysses famously was the safe haven where James Joyce found a home for Ulysses through a pornographic publisher. And Lolita suffered the same kind of fate. And it's curious to me because when the original Lolita was released by Kubrick, the marketing campaign had this kind of quite compelling strapline, which was, how did they make a film of Lolita? And that has a couple of shades to it, one of which is stylistic and formalistic, because Lolita as a novel is Nabokov. If we use like the proper pronunciation, we can have that debate about whether it's Nabokov or Nabokov or whatever. And it formally, stylistically, is a very florid, very complicated, nuanced. You started reading it last week,
yes,
I believe. Yeah,
never read it before. Never read any Nabokov before.
Here we go. So you've got fresh eyes. I've used to be kind of mildly obsessed with Nabokov, and so it's florid and complex and literary and off-putting. A lot of people found it quite off-putting for its kind of self-conscious art. I almost said artisanal there. I was so brain-pilled, poisoned. But it's also by its subject matter, right? And its subject matter is about the abuse, the horrific abuse subjected to a teenager or a young child, basically.
Presented in a very eroticized, glamorized way, to the point that you're invited to feel sympathetic towards someone who is complicit, towards someone who's undeniably causing harm and
because this is who Humbert is. And I think I'm not going to play the game where we say, well, neither film is faithful to the novel, whatever, but there's interesting things which Nabokov, in his great grace and his intelligence to horror and trauma and abuse, something that like reoccurs through all his books, is the loss of innocence. And people being robbed of innocence, whether by political powers or by the kind of machinations of animals and monsters. And in the novel, there is no confusing the idea that Humbert Humbert is a unreliable, difficult narrator. And part of the reason is because in the novel is prefaced by a psychologist's intro, because these are the notes that have been found after Humbert Humbert has died of pulmonary disease in hospital. And so the initial narrator, whether we believe that's implied narrator or whatever, tells us about his kind of clinical history, and kind of sets us up to believe that what we're about to read is a biased, poisoned narrative. And we learn through the book as well that Humbert Humbert was a psychiatric patient many times, had tried this before. Lolita was not his first victim, right? So, and then we enter the world of Lyne's film, which is a very sensual film, a very erotic film in a lot of ways. And I don't think are those the right words to describe it, because it uses erotic and visual language. This erotic visual language, I think.
I think Lyne's film is the most faithful to the novel, but Kubrick's film is the most faithful to the spirit of the story.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And I think that one of the critics said that it was Nabokov's black humour that is missing from Lyne's adaptation.
Lyne's reads very straight. It's a very not
and I think that's partly what compromises it, because you're not only it's fine to have the kind of, her soft legs. I'm not going to say it right, because it's like if you say that sort of stuff without being really good at writing, then you end up just sounding like a stupid idiot creep. Like by using language in this, excuse me, red wine burp, by using language in this really enticing and disturbing way that Nabokov does, you manage to you're morally in a better place. I don't know why that is. It's just like because
Humbert is playing the cards of he's basically, one of the ways he gets close to Lolita is he kind of hoodwinks and fools her mother, Mrs. Hayes, Charlotte Hayes, and she in the book and in the films is presented as being attracted to the kind of qualities of European intellectual, which is what she believes Humbert Humbert is, because he's teaching at Beardsley College or whatever, and she's kind of allured by his kind of Frenchified ways. And in the film, in Lyne's film specifically, one of the things he does is he makes out the mother to be more of a doofus than she kind of is, like, very easily hoodwinked, a bit of a fool, and she's just like paints her nails and kind of mispronounces French, and she's kind of like the reader in a way, who's being kind of. You barely see
her really in that in Lyne's film. I don't think she's performed very well, but I also think like.
She's like a bit of a doll, isn't she?
Yeah.
She's just like she's kind of dolled up to the nines, and she's fooled, she's hoodwinked by Humbert, and she kind of projects onto Humbert all these beliefs about how sophisticated Europe is, which is what happens to the reader when they read Lolita. Is that Humbert is trying to fool us, and he addresses it very directly. He nods and winks to the reader throughout. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury." He's addressing you. He's on the stand. He's defending himself. He's like fucking Saddam Hussein, on his trial.
Is that what Saddam did?
He did.
Before my time.
For your time. If you watch the excellent BBC episode 4 of the new BBC documentary about Iraq. It's got a specific episode which focuses on Saddam. I know we're going way off piece there, but in terms of like playing to the audience,
digression.
Yeah, it's a huge digression. But he played to the audience, and it showed that like he used court as a theatre, which is exactly what Humbert is doing with the novel. So when we kind of go to Lyne's adaptation, what we're missing the very obvious work that shows that this is an unreliable narrator. So all we've got is these scenes that are erotic, but we're not getting the erotic fed through. Maybe it's an impossible task, but we're getting the erotic fed through the camera, not Humbert's gaze.
Yeah, there seems to be a very naive assumption in the Adrian Lyne film about what it is to be cinematic, and it reminded me somewhat of The Great Gatsby as adapted by Baz Luhrmann quite recently.
The latest
with Leonardo DiCaprio, which what it shares with this Lolita adaptation is like quite long excerpts of voiceover from the narrative.
Yeah, these little interceptions to kind of realizing it's not doing much exegesis, so it's like, shit, we better explain.
It's like it's making up, it's overcompensating, which Nabokov, it's so bait to me. Sorry, I should finish the previous sentence. It's overcompensating like for like what you should be able to do with cinema. It's a simple show don't tell thing. Like, why, if you're adapting a book, why the hell would you need to read bits of the book in your adaptation of the book? It's
a kind of laziness.
Yeah, because the book, I mean, there are little bits in the Kubrick film which are like letters and stuff that have come from there. I'm approaching this in a very filmmaker way because I am a filmmaker. Like, I've always said this about this podcast. Like, we're filmmakers and we're fans more than we are critics. Like, we're thinking about these films like, what do we like and like what would we do differently? And I do think that with the Lyne film, it's like a really naive assumption. It's almost like it's been made as a film to show English, like GCSE English students.
100%. They're going to wheel out the
like,
TV.
They're
going to wheel out the TV and go,
you know, when they bring out the TV on wheels at school.
This is what it is. It's the apotheosis of that process.
The interactive whiteboard for younger listeners.
Yeah, this is as you remember, or the Zoom call for the
the COVID the generation screwed over by the COVID grades.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's like that. It's like some sort of like edXL guide to like how to understand, like how to like. Makes it easier to read the book. I was flicking through the book while I was watching the Lyne film on my laptop, and I was kind of checking the book for dialogue because there were certain bits that were so poorly performed that I just assumed that the lines were so bad that they weren't in the book.
Screen right here, yeah.
And then I looked in the book, and I was like, oh no, she does say that.
Yeah,
and then I was like, oh, actually, like lines not that important. Like it's about all the things you build around the lines.
Yeah, it's the context, and also one interesting. It basically Nabokov moved his family from Germany to America. He uprooted himself. He went to a college and taught in a college. He taught at Cornell, I think, eventually, and taught an excellent course in Russian literature, which you can actually like buy his lectures, and they're incredible. Like not particularly like scholastically sound, but interesting takes on like the Russian classics. And one of the interesting things to understand about Nabokov is that he felt that he was kind of in a way trapped in his childhood because he came from a very aristocratic Russian family. Has your pizza arrived?
No, it hasn't. I was just checking if it has.
That's actually a direct quote. That's a famous Nabokov book, Has Your Pizza Arrived? So he came from a very aristocratic family, had an idyllic upbringing. Obviously, the Russians of the kind of early 20th century sort of had a dasha in the countryside. His parents were very educated and worldly. His first language was English. He spoke English before he spoke Russian, spoke French before he spoke Russian. He's very Europeanized. He was sundered from his homeland, he believed, by the revolution. His family fled and kind of lived in penury in Germany and then France. And then he left to America. That coloured him in a lot of ways because a lot of his books are about this abandoned, this destroyed past that he can never attain. And the nostalgia kind of rings all of his books. And there's a lot of places in his novels. So The Real Life of Sebastian Knight, for example, in that case, that character, the protagonist, kind of passes through this painting, like this mystical veil, into his childhood and into Eastern Europe, and dies in the process. And it's this kind of fantastical returning. And it's the same with Dar, which is The Gift, his last Russian language book, which is all obsessed with this kind of tragic, fatal past that he could no longer recover. So for him, like, the loss of innocence isn't just like a passing fancy with Lolita. This is like a major life's theme. This is the theme of his work. This is the core of his obsession. But he goes to America and he falls in love with it. There's something about the kind of dumb optimism of American culture in the 50s that he's really attracted by, and he loves gas stations. He loves motels. He loves Americana. He loves lollipops and milkshakes and pop stars. He comes really weirdly.
He loves it more than the Americans do.
He does, because he's seeing it as an outsider.
Yeah.
So in a way, Lolita is also a love letter to America, strangely.
Yeah.
It's also that. I think it is also that. So when you read the book, it's an incredible document of these road trips, which actually Nabokov himself took across America and took his family, because his thing was Lepidoptera. It was like hunting for butterflies, right? So he dragged his family, Vera and his son, across America hunting for butterflies. So in a way, this is kind of like his journey as well. And I'm not like crossing those streams. It's not to say that I'm not even going to like touch on it. Like, Nabokov was not a paedophile, and doesn't make him a paedophile by writing this book. And this was one of the misreadings. You know, when I was reading through old newspaper reviews of the book when it came out, either people think Nabokov is a decadent aesthete and paedophile, or they believe that Humbert is just a sympathetic character. And it took a while critically for Lolita to be seen as a victim. And it's really interesting to read certain reviews, you know, where they...
People almost telling on themselves.
Yeah, they
by
really
saying
are.
that, like... Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like there are reviews where people are like, oh, well, you know, it's really a story about a man, like, not being able to kind of like hold back on his lusts, you know, keep it in his trousers. And it's like, it's not like, a book
dude,
about
like,
a man.
if that's what you think that's about, then that's maybe what you are.
Yeah. So it's kind of weird, like he tapped into something else in American culture, and it's kind of sexualization of youth. So it must have been very shocking for Nabokov, who was quite a stick in the mud and quite a uptight European.
Can I say something about the pedo sympathy aspect of it?
Yeah, go on.
So in both films by Kubrick and by Adrian Lyne, the actor who played Lolita was aged 16.
Yes.
And the character of Lolita in the book is 12.
Mm-hmm. It's
now,
not a big difference.
Part of the reason probably part of the reason for that casting is that the film spans about 4 years, and the amount of aging that takes place
brings them to about 16, 17.
Yeah, brings them about to 16. So you want to have an actor. The other reason would be that there are certain intimate scenes where it would be quite inappropriate,
quite problematic.
More so in the Adrian Lyne. I don't think they actually kiss or touch much.
I mean, it was a
film.
60s film, still had to be coded. Yeah. So yeah. Hays Code, interestingly, is the
Hays Code.
Yeah,
different spelling of Hays. But yeah, so I guess, what am I saying here? I guess I'm saying that like so it's not really great for a 50-year-old man to be having a wank over a 16-year-old girl, but I would say it's like definitely a lot worse over a 12-year-old girl, in the way that it's definitely a lot worse if it's an 8-year-old. You know what I mean? Like there is some difference there.
Weird,
and I think that using a 16-year-old actor who you could imagine be possibly 18
it's complex territory
older,
because they are subjecting obviously that's
in a book you can write anything. Yeah,
book you can write anything, but obviously 16 is the age of consent, and it's the age of sexual maturity. So we believe. Culturally, I'm not disputing that. Sounds like some sort of conspiracy theory podcast. It's really not. Please don't listen to that part and think I'm arguing otherwise. But the casting in the production, it's complicated. I was watching it thinking, because I googled it when I was watching it. I was like, how old was the actor when in the Lyne film when she was cast? And I was like, she's 16. It's sort of probably. You know, and it's complicated. Like, how do you really film that? It's you're very like, this is probably her first film. She's very like new to Hollywood, and you're cast with this older, mature actor. I'm sure it was very professional on set, but it does raise certain.
It's a bit like that bit in the Brass Eye Pedogeddon episode where they do a historical reconstruction of what paedophilia would look like, but with a 21-year-old actor, and they say like, in real life, her breasts would be small like a boy's.
Why don't you fancy my son?
Yeah, like it would be. I mean, obviously, like I say, I don't think it's acceptable to sexualize people who are 16, but clearly a 16-year-old girl like has a very different effect visually to a 12-year-old girl. In that, like that, it's like less. You know, like it's less. It's just a bit less disturbing.
Yeah, a lot less disturbing.
To have to see
casting a 12-year-old. In that role. Yeah,
have to have an actual 12-year-old girl or a girl that looks 12 in that role would genuinely be like, it would be really frightening. I think. Yeah,
I think the
but the book is frightening because the book is about a 12-year-old.
Yeah, the book is about a 12-year-old. The book is also a lot more inside, even though Humbert is trying to sympathy for the devil. He's trying to show that he's an innocent party and he's an honest and good man. I can't help still describing in kind of anatomical detail those seductions, and it's in the book, in the lead up to the first rape. There is a lot of his like masturbatory behavior in the house, in the Hayes household, which is him rubbing himself on her when she's asleep. So this is very graphic, but and kind of like rubbing himself on sofas and kind of finding all these ways to like come. And so you see that, and you see this kind of predatory, monstrous thing. Whereas Jeremy Irons, who is excellent as Humbert Humbert in this, because it's like the role Jeremy Irons was born to play, this creepy, I could marry my son, man. We
that and Reading the Wasteland, he does like a really good T.S. Eliot readings. He does really good. Of course he does,
because he occupies the wasteland.
Shout out to Jeremy
Irons are the
Irons.
cruelest man. He's sort of like, it seems like this dupe and this kind of bumbling idiot in Lyne's film, and it's, you know, very much Lolita is cast as the seductress in Lyne's film, which is something which Humbert argues in the book, but we have all this like padding to show that that's not the case.
Yeah, that's the thing about the unreliable narrator, is that it's harder to do. It's much harder to do unreliable narrator in a film, and therefore you need to go to comedy, because comedy creates a distance, and that's what's really good about the Peter Sellers character. And I just want to
Quilty in the original,
Quilty in the original, played by Peter Sellers, who kind of plays these weird practical jokes on Humbert Humbert. I mean, also just another thing to say about the script with Kubrick, like the script for Kubrick's film was written by Nabokov, and it's really telling that Nabokov felt confident enough working in cinema to radically change his script to make it better for film, and adjust things and alter things. Almost, it seems like he knew that Peter Sellers was going to play Quilty, the way that he gets him to do all these different roles.
This very campy, very Peter Sellers film, and like.
Whereas Lyne doesn't have the guts to.
The Quilty character in Lyne's version of the film is this mustachioed, kind of sinister character, and at the end there's flashes of him kind of trying to imitate Sellers in a way. This absurdity, like
it's so grim. The Quilty performance is just absolutely.
It really descends into farce.
It's so shit, but not farce in a good way. Like he's he's kind of like, for the first few times you see Quilty, you don't even see him. There's like kind of a bolt of lightning and
he's smoking a cigar and his face is shrouded.
Like that's not how life is.
No, and it's not true to the rest of the film.
It's like a student production or something.
It's like we need to show an evil guy, so here his face is obscured by a trilby, and it does all this stuff. Whereas Sellers in Kubrick's version of the film brings it to life, and he adds this absurdity. Like you said.
And he's likable in a very strange way. Quilty is, because he's so funny. You just think, and because you don't realise that he's predatory.
He's the face of the monster that Humbert can't show.
Exactly.
Because,
so you see basically Humbert and Quilty are kind of the same person. They're both they both have the same like controlling, violent, predatory urges. But like one of them is presented as a kind of
a good
comic
guy
figure. I think that's pizza. Welcome back, listeners. We just had some pizza. The pizza arrived halfway through. And we've cracked open a bottle of Malbec, and we're talking about Lolita. What's the worst that could happen?
I'm actually right now the alcohol's flowing.
I wanted to say this though, because I suppose the thing about this podcast, regular listeners will have sensed the vibe that I feel like this is an arm of both of our multifaceted practices, and I guess the project, amongst other things, is to find like a comfortable place for, I guess, straight male spectatorship in a changing world, in like a world, like to try and sort of.
We're trying to work through. I kind of work the male gaze backwards a little bit.
Go on, say more.
So, I think it's interesting how kind of quite a lot of the films we've chosen, because obviously Mubi it provides like a kind of select curation of films. There's still an element of choice there, which is just picking out certain films over others. and actually we're going to choose more salacious films or more kind of controversial films, whether, and that impulse in itself is quite interesting.
We reviewed 8.5 and Love,
and sort of Showgirls, which all have the the kind of male perspective is interrogated or shamed. And I think one of the key parts of this project for us has been trying to talk about kind of work back our feelings and kind of work back and sort of our real responses to things and kind of interrogate ideas of maleness, I think, and through these films which often center maleness, don't necessarily problematize it but center at least. I think that's part of it for both of us, and you as a practicing filmmaker, that's front and center for you to make film. How do you make films about intimacy, and specifically like male heterosexual intimacy and love? And I think that's all things like desire and need and love have been at, like, I know we're now kind of reviewing your films, but whatever. But the center of things like your 1001 Nights. I was about to say elegy, but your what's the word, like
I'll be happy with elegy.
Elegy, yeah, to it, and
big dick elegy.
It's like, why shouldn't we call it that? The podcast had a radical change of name.
Oh my god! Imagine if the podcast was called Big Dick Elegy.
There's actually a website which I find really interesting. We're kind of going off piece here a little bit, but it's fine. God. And there's a website where men will. It's
not Mr. Skin, is it?
I don't know if it's Mr. Skin. It's where men review each other's dick pics.
Okay, no, it's not that.
And it's actually, I went on this website because I found the idea really curious, and I was like, okay. And it comes from this the desire to send a dick pic in itself is an interesting one. I don't do it. Haven't done it. But
I sent one once.
And it's a kind of an interesting impulse because it's often something that's quite ridiculed and whatever. And I suppose there's obviously often I imagine it is very creepy, but there's also an uncertainty about how men can kind of sexualize their own bodies in a appealing way, and they don't really know how to do it. And this site is a surprising kind of community of really good support. It's like guys giving each other tips about how they can improve, and it's really supportive. It's like, hey King, like great, great shaft, like looking great. And it's this weirdly supportive community, and it's just really odd being in this space because it's just very supportive, and it's just like they just kind of want reassurance. They just want like a virtual hug about, is their dick pic okay?
Well, dick pics were always about reassurance. I mean, every time I've wanted to send one, and the one time I did send one, there was definitely a
Thank
sense.
you for that, by the way. It was really it was really appreciated. Bit weird in the middle of the night, but fine. 8 out of 10.
Well, anytime.
Should we get back to the film about paedophilia and rape?
Yeah. So,
where were we? Okay.
Well, so you were saying very nice things about my work, and before that we were talking about the podcast, which is called MoveTube, and it is, there's the sort of there's a slightly, when we write copy for the episodes, there's a bit of a Top Gear energy. We're sort of, the boys are investing. It's just like, because it's such a cliche for like two men to get together and do a podcast about movies. I suppose we're sort of like leaning into that and thinking about ways in which we can be like similar but different, like sort of like be what we are and be with our desires as spectators, but also like sort of like be a bit mindful and acknowledge how that happens, but not being ashamed, just enjoying it. And that's sort of what I was getting at with my horniness essay, which was sort of trying to say like, okay, yeah, like the male gaze is dominated and it's caused a lot of, it's like it's really sort of unfair what's happened, but also like as a man, a straight man, like I sort of,
what do you do?
This sort of this like there are times when this kind of oppressive worldview sort of affirms my desires.
But there's other times where the reaction can crush that, because it's to work against the idea that the male perspective is irrelevant and invalid. And I think often it's shut out, in particular online spaces. And I think it's specifically online spaces, because in the real world, people actually have much more frank and open conversations, and this stuff doesn't happen. But online, it's very much like, you're a man, shut the fuck up.
I do think that's a bit of a taboo to say that, but I've definitely felt that, like, within the sort of narrow field that we operate in, like lefty art politics, there's like a sort of a shame that you need to if you're a man, you sort of just preface everything with shame.
And shame is negative.
It's sort of leveling everyone down to imposter syndrome.
Yes. But I mean, this is weird, but it doesn't really have a bearing on, like, specifically Lolita. But I think with Lolita, it's interesting because, like, that's why we're talking about Lolita as a cultural artifact, because Nabokov, when he created this film, and I presume Kubrick and I assume Lyne as well, kind of knew the game here, which is that Humbert Humbert is unequivocally a monster, an abuser, and it's just so happened that in the cultural reception of Lolita, that she has kind of become shorthand for a coquettish seduction. And it's very strange because people are playing to Humbert Humbert is playing to the court, and people listened. They stood up and applauded him. And again, one of the key themes throughout the films and the book is in a way, and Lyne doesn't do it particularly well. I think he doesn't do that huge void. The huge void at the center of the book is the absence of Lolita. It's a book all about Lolita, but she doesn't appear. She never voices herself. It's entirely authored through Humbert Humbert's gaze and his pen, and people have fallen for it to the point, like I said, where Lolita just comes now to mean kind of jailbait seduction.
That's interesting. So you think, I don't know much about the book because I've only just started reading it, but there's because he's an unreliable narrator, he or like, I guess any narrator is kind of unreliable in that you don't know. You're just seeing it from that person's perspective, but clearly it's quite a contentious thing, and you can sort of, sometimes the way someone tells a story, you can start to make your own conclusions about how the people they're describing really felt about what happened. And I guess, I mean, when I was reading it, I'm not trying to be morally superior here, but like, when I was reading it, I very much read his description of her behavior where it was described as being like seductive and cock-teasy. I was like always aware that also, like, he was in the position of power and he was the one kind of pushing,
and he's post facto,
like, he's the one who has already had like this, he's got this obsession with younger girls, and he's pressing all that. Well, he does. Her.
I mean, Lyne's film does kind of acknowledge this in a way, because at the beginning, when we see a moment where Humbert is beginning to write his memoirs, and he looks down through the window, and it's quite a good scene actually, and he looks and he sees Lolita hugging her friend, who's also a young girl, and in that moment he starts kind of unloading on his theory of nymphets, which is actually a neologism that kind of Nabokov coined in writing.
I've never heard it
the
before.
Book. It's a very specific thing, and there's quite a lot of pages are devoted in the book to kind of Humbert kind of in an anatomical way describing the kind of genealogy of nymphets to him. It's very specific. It's obviously he's describing a kink basically, and he's describing the real particularities of this kink.
I
to
hated
him.
That bit.
It's
really well written, but it does make you sick.
It's skin crawling, and that's the thing. And it's like you don't get that in either film, I suppose, because it's
not cinematic.
It's not cinematic, and that's saying because this is a movie podcast, right? But I said movie. Interesting. It's a film podcast, it's a movie podcast, and it's hard to express those things, but in the book the overriding feeling you get is of a predator and a monster who's very calculated, and who is this unreliable narrator who's telling us after the fact that yes in fact Lolita seduced me. We know that's not true in the that's the fabula of the story. It's not the actual real thing. It's somebody's account, and Lyne doesn't really give us that. He does have a moment, like I said, where there is this voiceover, and Humbert Jeremy Irons is writing these notes, and he begins to talk about the idea of this nymphette, and we get this little flashback to Humbert's youth and his love of Annabelle, who's this girl, and it's when he lives in Europe and this girl dies of typhus, and that's a thing from the book as well. I can't remember, is that in the Kubrick film? the genesis of his.
No, Kubrick film completely avoids all of that stuff. There are most of the Kubrick film is a flashback from the moment where he kills Quilty, but there are no further flashbacks.
Okay. Well, I should have watched it again. I watched it Kubrick film years ago. But yeah, so we get this moment where he is in kind of flashback. We see Annabelle, we see this early love which was quashed, and the way he describes it, the way he justifies it, is his attraction to Lolita is simply the realization of this old fossilized love, which is part of the Humbert Humbert madness.
He's like, I'm fine, I'm harmless, I'm just projecting something, a past trauma onto a completely unsuspecting 12-year-old girl.
Exactly.
What possibly could be wrong with that?
And I think the funny thing about Lyne's film is it does everything it can to make Lolita as a character feel annoying.
Yeah, she's much more of a bitch in the Lyne film, which again, I just think the Lyne film is like, the Lyne film has this sickly devotion to like being true to the book, which, as I said before, is absurd because the author of the book wrote a screenplay for a film that was much better. But like, secondly, like when you try and put a square rod into a circular hole, like, you know, you end up losing a lot of the moral dignity of what Nabokov was after. And I guess that comes back to the fact that in the book, I think this happens in all three incarnations, but it's significant in the book that the final line of part one, it's in two parts, the book, and the final line describes an argument that they have after he's revealed to Lolita that her mother has died. Yeah, in this car accident. Yeah. Or suicide. And he says that they had a fight, but that the fight was resolved. And the final words of part one are because she had nowhere else to go. Yeah. And that line is repeated in the line, word for word, in the Lyne film. Very much, yeah. But it doesn't. It's something about that line being the very last few words of part one. Yeah. And that really foreground, like literary, like you know how it is when you read James Baldwin does this particularly well, like when a chapter finishes, the last few lines are always like, of a particular chapter are always like, oof, like everything is encapsulated there. Stone is sinking. And yeah, exactly. And what he's saying there is his entrapment is complete. So it's like she does make choices. And that's a really good literary way of saying, yes, Lolita did make some choices here. Yeah, she wasn't completely like being forced to do everything she did, but like there's a slight tacit acknowledgement from this narrator that the whole situation that's been created has basically meant that what else can she do? Where else is she going to get a livelihood? It's orchestrated by the coward Humbert because his dream is to kill, and he acknowledges this in Lyne's film, which is to kill, ideally is to kill the mother, and he can't bring himself to do that, he says. She ends up finding out about his diary. He gets what he wants. And she dies. She's struck by a car or throws herself in front of the car, however we read that. I don't think... I think it is an accident. I think it's an honest to goodness accident, and it kind of plays up the cowardice of Humbert because he's kind of taking advantage of things. He's always one to take advantage of things. He's not a creator, and he says no beauty about him. And I think Nabokov's disdain for Humbert is very clear in the book, and it's not clear in Lyne's film. And the stiff preposterousness of James Mason in the Kubrick film, of just like, I'm James Mason, this ridiculous kind of preposterous character. We can see the kind of like absurdity of him, but with Jeremy Irons chooses to play it, and he plays it very well because Jeremy Irons is a very good actor, but he plays it in this very, like I said, this kind of duped romantic fop. I'm just a blundering Englishman. This American forwardness is quite peculiar to me. So when Lolita first kisses him, she runs back into the house. She's being stolen away to summer camp by a awful bitch of a mother,
and she runs back in and kind of jumps on, this is the film by the way, jumps on Jeremy Irons, and there's this scene where the camera kind of lingers on her body, which is what it does when he first sees her in the garden, with the sprinkler kind of soaking her, making her clothes transparent.
It's so awful.
It's really awful. The film does all this kind of sexualizing. It recreates.
It tries to do what the book does, but you can't just do that when you're adapting a book. You can't just like
blow for blow.
Yeah, it's not a screenplay. You can't just go, oh, her luscious legs, let's get a shot of her legs.
Yeah,
you know, like that's
then
literally
you're just
what
doing
he does.
The thing.
Yeah, like that's not how
this is like this,
imagination works.
No, it's not how imagination works. This is the equivalent of like when the CIA were caught out recently for like, what was it, running the biggest child porn server on the internet because they had this honey trap thing, and it's like,
really, is that true?
Yeah, this is true. My facts, I don't know if it's necessarily the largest, but they were running this huge like child porn database online, and their idea was, it's like, but you're running the biggest, best, as it were, one.
It's kind of similar with terrorism, right? They do these. They get these sort of.
You do a 9/11.
They let these people. No, they don't. I'm not saying that, but like,
that's what you're saying.
There are people like Anjem Chowdhury who like someone could just give him a bit of a talking to, but they let him do speech. They let him do speeches so that they can take loads of of evidence gathering, and then out in the corner of one picture there'll be some guy who like 4 years later bombs a train.
This is it. You hand them the weapons to do. You know, it's like it's the theme of Chris Morris's actually not great.
The Day Shall Come. We want to see it together, actually. We should have done a movie review of that. The Day Shall Come. The hilariously disappointing Chris Morris project that was very sincere in its aims. That was just not that good.
No, and this thing, but the whole theme of that film is about the kind of FBI creating the terrorists to attack them, to arrest them. And it's,
so go on, how does this relate to Lolita?
How does this relate to like I said, to be clear,
3 glasses of wine deep.
This film, it kind of, like I said, it doesn't have the texture and the complexity and the nuance of the book, obviously, because it's a film, to show us the why this gaze is problematic. It just shows us the gaze, and it shows us these hypersexualized scenes. You know, like I said, when he first goes in the garden, there's this sprinkler on, which is a scene in the book, but again, we've had all this build up from Humbert. We've had all of this stuff to know he's a monster and a predator, so we know he's an unreliable narrator. Obviously he's going to be turned on by any child, as it were, almost, and we see the scene, and her clothes are soaked through, they've gone transparent, it's like this wet t-shirt competition, but it's a fucking child.
I also thought it would be with that thing you just said now, with that thing you just said about like how he would be attracted to any child. I thought that it would have been interesting to cast a really ugly teenager, because I think that's another aspect of this like problematic fetishization, is that they, I guess in both films, they pick like a
photogenic,
bit, like totally, when you're in school and like there's one girl who's like captain of the netball team, like really. I
went to a state school, so we didn't have that.
Okay. A bit of class war here. They pick a really attractive actor to play Lolita, and actually, like, I think it would be more interesting to perhaps someone a bit more plain looking, just to show that desire, because just to show that desire in a way that doesn't necessarily, that isn't focused
we've
on.
Come back to that, Chris Morris. Why aren't you attracted to my son?
Because it's really different in a book. Like in the book, you let the viewer imagine an attractive woman, and you read lots of things about, like, you're sort of caught between this thing where like you imagine like beautiful feminine knees and legs or whatever, then suddenly they describe a kind of prepubescent chest or something, you know what I mean? Like it sort of wears between like things that are kind of normally adjusted straight man would find attractive and things that are like really pedo-y, whereas in a film you have to lock all that stuff into one person's body. And I guess like it would be, it's just too easy to just find a really kind of photogenic 16-year-old
chuck her in some small clothes, and get the clothes wet, and then show that. And I think that's it. It's
like it's actually not really deep. It's not really problematizing any of it. No. It's actually just giving people like a wank bank. Like
this is it, and this is like who because like periodically Lolita kind of reemerges on Twitter, and people have the same tired debate about it. Yes, please, Ralph. I'd like some more wine. It resurfaces on Twitter every now and again, and people talk about, and there's that. I think it came off the back of that tweet where someone was like, "These are 7 signs if you look at a guy's bookshelf. These are red flags." And it was like, he's got a copy of Ayn Rand, and he's got a copy of which, not it's a red flag, but why the fuck would you have that? And it's kind of, one of them was Lolita. It's like absolute red flag if he has like Infinite Jest and Lolita, and it's one of the things. Again, that's the kind of dumb assumption that a book from a particular perspective, the book condones that perspective. The narrator, this is an unreliable narrator. That's literary criticism.
The real red flag is if they listen to MoobTube.
yeah, I don't personally.
You did a good on the Owen does the Twitter for MoobTube, just in case anyone's wondering.
Ralph does the Instagram.
I do the Instagram. We both have difficult relationships with social media.
Addicts. Call it what it is. The first step of AA is to admit you have a problem.
Yeah. But yeah, you did a very good movie version of that.
Yeah, we did. I mean, you did, because again, there are certain films, and I think perhaps it's because, and maybe the line is equivalent to that. So maybe, okay, so let's take it back. Are the problems with Lyne's 1997 version of Lolita, are we bumping up against the limitations of the form of cinema here with its failures, and its conflation of the camera's gaze with Humbert's gaze without problematizing it? Is that we bumping against what can be done? Is Lolita an unfilmable film, or is it just Lyne's lack of creative vision and his kind of almost farcical belief that he's kind of flying so closely to the text, he believes that he kind of burns himself on it?
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't find the Icarus metaphor to be the best, because I think it's like,
I went to state school, fuck you. That's the only one we had.
I come in peace. I just think he, it's just the wrong fit to try and literalize literature in visual language. Like that's not what an adaptation is. No. Like films, good films of books tend to differ. And and the no better evidence of that can be found than Nabokov's script of his own film for Kubrick. Yeah. So I just don't know why the fuck they bothered, to be honest.
Because actually, interestingly, by 1997, the furore and the controversy of Lolita had really died down. It become a classic, an accepted classic.
Yeah, everyone kind of agrees it's
Social
good now.
mores had moved on to a point where we didn't find it. It wasn't shocking in the way that it was in the 50s, because it was shocking in the way in the 50s it exposed child abuse in American suburbia in the way the Lynch. Here we're talking about Lynch again, but Nabokov is doing a very similar project to Lynch in like Twin Peaks is the style of Twin Peaks is actually a really good parallel for what is happening in Lolita, which is this rot at the core of suburbia, which is something that Lynch loves and despises, and it's something that Nabokov loves and despises. But I mean, talk about the Kubrick version for a bit, because I haven't rewatched it because I'm lazy. And I couldn't find a torrent quickly enough.
I'll send you my file.
Cheers, mate. But tell me about the Kubrick one. Why do you think the Kubrick one works, and why do you believe it's close to the spirit of Nabokov's book?
I think the reason is that trauma and comedy have a interesting relationship in life, and there's like if you do a generally speaking, I love to just go into huge generalizations on this show.
Do it.
Generally speaking, if you've personally experienced something quite horrendous and troubling, there is a register, not the only register, but there is one register of talking about it that involves humor, and that's because humor is a very necessary release when you are dealing with something painful. It is just too difficult to live life holding seriousness around your experiences only. There always needs to be a little moment where you have a laugh, where there's some dark humor or some absurdity. And so in regards to Lolita, so what I would say there is that like over seriousness, or around a topic that's quite dark and difficult, can do an injustice to the truth content of that. And so in regards to Lolita, in the Lyne film, you have like this real you have this kind of general atmosphere of moral concern running through it, and then you have this kind of these really sincere, intense performances, and this kind of this dogged ambition to kind of represent the desire in a very visual way, and lots of slow motion and lots of like lens tilt shifts and stuff, and it's just over stylized.
When it begins to show Humbert's paranoia and breakdown,
exactly, like
with the fisheye lenses,
every feeling somehow has to be like manifest through some like optical visual display.
It's very like Lyne sitting there and going over to the cinematographer and being like, hey mate, we just need to show that he's breaking down. He's like, I know what, we've got the perfect fisheye lens for this.
It's just disastrous. Anyway, the Kubrick film like is made in quite a conventional way cinematographically. Like there's nothing particularly innovative there, which we know Kubrick can do innovative cinematography.
He's playing it straight,
but he plays it straight with Lolita. There's no really unusual shots in it. It's sort of done like a kind of sort of soft noir kind of vibe,
very much,
quite studio based, and it's funny, and it's like there's an element of weirdness, and there's an element of like humor, and like the first hour of it, which I think is basically the best. It's a very long film, the Kubrick version, isn't it? 2.5 hours plus. But yeah, the first hour of it has this quality of a farce. It's a little bit like watching Fawlty Towers. The way that he like tries to look at Lolita, the way that he's basically thinks that Charlotte's an idiot, and like doesn't want to move in with her, and then suddenly he sees this 12-year-old girl in the grass,
and it's
changes
done this very
bumbling
bumbling way, whereas it's done in a very she's all that seductive way.
Exactly,
in the Lyne film, it's done like this. He goes to this ramshackle house, and it again, it's just Charlotte just is an idiot. And then it has this, it's very literal. That's the problem. The literalness of Lyne's film is what is its greatest weakness, because like you said, there's a great soundstage quality to Kubrick's version, and it's this very staginess, and it's like you said, like Fawlty Towers, it's this very kind of like slapsticky in the same way that like Dr. Strangelove was a film, very different context, different world. A film I think has a really similar energy to it, weirdly, not just with the presence of Peter Sellers, but is able to evoke something very serious like nuclear holocaust through this bumbling dark comedic light. And this film does a very similar thing, and like you said, it's kind of funny, and that kind of embodies Nabokov's way of Humbert slowly getting his kicks off of Lolita, and I think that's it. I think there's just this halcyon glow around Lyne's film that he tries to create, and he's trying to make a romance out of a paedophilic rape. That's the problem. That's the heart of Lyne's film, and it's like this is not a romantic film. And stop trying to make it a romantic film. Make it what it is, which is an act of falsification, ventriloquism, forgery, and by Kubrick, like you said, creating a film against the grain of how he makes films. He's himself ventriloquizing a format that he's not completely comfortable with, and I think that's what kind of gives it its energy, and it's what gives it its grit and makes it work. And
that's, I think, the thing with humor that, like, because I don't think Adrian Lyne went into making that film thinking, oh yeah, Humbert, I know how you feel, mate. Fucking hell, those little soft breasts, yeah. Like, he was thinking like, oh, we should make a film about how nasty this is, but a bit of more complexity, make the viewer get a little bit of a hard on as well.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
and that's this weird edgelord logic of like, make them enticed, but also show them it's bad.
Should you be? You're now
and it's like, that's not how moral complexity works. That's just like manipulation. That's not storytelling. Like what Kubrick does is like genuinely like uses comedy, the tool of comedy, to bring the moral, the depravity actually. Depravity comes more fluently than complexity here, but I mean it is complex because life is complex. But I mean, you know, like it's very like we've said throughout, like it's a very clear power dynamic, and you know, but yeah, like humor saves the day here. So I think it's an important lesson for anyone, you know, like thinking about ways to depict sensitive topics. Like actually sometimes you may think that a serious approach is the safest option, but actually humor can really be a lot better for creating the
instability.
Creating like a truthful representation of moral complexity,
because it keeps you on your feet, which is what Kubrick's film does, and the same thing that Nabokov's book does. Like actually Lolita as a text keeps you on your toes.
But both films suffer, I think, a little bit of a dip towards in the bit in the car where they're being followed and he's kind of dragging her along.
Well, that's a really interesting. That's the thing.
How is that bit in the book? Because I haven't got to that bit.
Okay. It's good because there's this. Actually, that's the paranoia of that section is interesting, because one of the key themes for Nabokov throughout his writing, like I said earlier, I didn't even allude to it. I said it was his interest in the double and the mirror. He was interested in doppelgangers, in parallels and mirrors, and the kind of mise en abîme of two mirrors facing each other. In that section, it's paranoid. You know, Lynn shows us Humbert Humbert, like you said, this fisheye lens sequence. This is where Quilty is kind of pursuing and seducing Lolita at the same time. Now, in the book, it's just played as Humbert Humbert's paranoia. In the film, in Lyne's film. In the book, there's this interesting. There's still the comedy and the weirdness is still there. It's a language game at that point, because it feels like Quilty is actively leading Humbert on. One thing Nabokov uses a lot is anagrams with his own name.
Okay.
So there's like in the entries from the motel books, there's like Vivian Darkbloom and stuff like this. It's always like
that's Nabokov.
Yeah, it's Vladimir Nabokov. So there's all these like allusions to Nabokov inserting himself into the text, and he's showing that there's like this element of paranoia and this comedy and this weirdness, and it's that kind of reverse pursuit that happens in the book is actually a really bizarre kind of reverse road trip. It's like an anti-road trip, and it's really enthralling and interesting, because it's the unraveling of Humbert Humbert, but you know, whose own name is a doubling, is a mirror, Humbert Humbert. You know, true. And it's like it's this weird name. It's a weird name. I mean, Nabokov had a lot of characters with weird names, to be honest, but it's kind of there in the surface of it. But Lyne's film, it's just like this kind of breakdown, kind of act 3 of the film. You know, you've got the initial establishing narrative, the seduction, the breakdown, the conclusion. You've got these 4 kind of chapters, which are then bookended by like this end of film. So we actually don't see. We see. Actually, this is the annoying thing. We see Humbert come to only a heroic end, which is how does he kill himself in the Line? He kills himself in the Line film, doesn't he? Or is he shot?
Humbert.
Yeah. No, he dies. It tells us in the postscript. But he has this scene where he's kind of driving down the road, kind of swerving down the road chaotically, and he's got the gun that he killed Quilty with in his hand. But he's got like a hair grip as well. He's got a hair grip. Yeah, and it's shown to be this kind of he's this tragic romantic figure. He's this young. Yeah, it does
romanticize him. It makes him into a bit of a hero.
It really romanticizes him. There's nothing romantic about James Mason.
It's true, actually. Yeah. James Mason is kind of like quite pathetic and cold.
Yeah.
Whilst also you do sort of weirdly root for him in the first hour, just because it's like a funny farce. But like But there is that kind of coldness, and I think that is an important, again with the seriousness and the identification thing, like getting the reader or the viewer to identify with someone's actions is not the same as trying to get them to support the actions. And I think
No.
that's probably the mistake that the Lyne film does just try to say to you, "Core, look at her. Of course you'd want to do that."
Yeah.
Which is like really wrong.
Could you really blame her?
Yeah.
That's
Whereas
what it's
Nabokov's
saying,
book and Kubrick's film are like, they just show you how much he wanted that.
Yeah, and how willing he was to compromise.
Yeah.
every
That's all you
norm,
need to
every
do.
taboo to do that. Yeah,
You don't need to like. Moral complexity is not about like
seriously
trying to trick your viewer into being a paedophile.
That's the ultimate line on this. So the line on Lyne is that he's trying to fool he's trying to basically.
But Lyne is probably a good person and doesn't actually think that.
Sure,
but it's just a misinterpretation of like
no. This is
what
the Alex
Nabokov's
Jones
genius
thing.
is.
The frogs are making people gay, or the water is making the frogs gay. This is basically Lyne is trying to turn everyone to a paedophile with this film.
The other thing as well is that great bit in. I've probably seen the Pedogeddon episode of Brass Eye like 10 times or more. But there's
Nymphogeddon is what we should call Nymphogeddon is what we should call this episode.
There's a great bit like it's like that the fake ad break, the fake Channel 4 ad break, and it's about this pedo hunter. Of course, there are now loads of shows like To Catch a Predator and stuff.
Yeah.
But the premise of this trailer is this guy. And he says they don't need punishment, they need gunishment. And then there's a bit where he talks about his own past as a child abuser, and he says I know how these people work, I know how their sick minds function, I was one, for Christ's sake. I shot the pedo in my, and like there's a video of him shooting himself in the head. Like it's just like, and it just reminded me of like the bit in Lolita, the thing I referred to in my intro about how Humbert is not caught out by any of the kind of bystanders or onlookers. He's caught out by another monster.
Yeah,
I just thought that reminds me of that bit in
relevant.
Brass Eye where the guy goes, "I was one, for Christ's sake."
It also reminds me of that Monkey Dust, R.I.P. Do you remember Monkey Dust?
Vaguely. I think I watched it once.
The pedo finder general.
No, I don't know.
By the powers vested in me by News Corp International.
Pedo Finder General.
The Pedo Finder General.
But there are shows like this. There's that awful show To Catch a Predator.
I haven't seen To Catch a Predator.
That's an American show where a guy, like, he pretends to. I've never watched it, but I've been told that he pretends to be like a 12-year-old girl, and it's
like a catfishing.
And he chats
thing,
to pedos, and he says, "Oh, meet me on the corner of Thingy Street," and then he just like gets the cops and arrests the person.
Interesting.
Like
this is the FBI thing we were talking about.
That's
earlier,
like
the CIA, whatever,
that's so terrible.
It's so
morally
fucked.
that disgusts me almost as much as paedophilia.
That's not a preventative thing. That's not
encouraging people's perverted desires so that you can kind of claim some moral superiority.
That's
you're
the pits
generating of humanity.
Yeah, you're generating the problem. On that note, sunny note, we've
hit time beyond, like, way
beyond
before.
hit time.
But we need
Lolita
to.
has now turned 18.
And now we're allowed to have sex with her.
God.
Shout out to Woody Allen.
I mean, that's its own. That's a whole. If a Woody Allen film, have we cancelled Woody Allen?
The only Woody Allen film that would cause me to
Allen.
talk about Woody Allen's private life would be Manhattan. Because that is about an older guy who really likes the younger girl. I
find Manhattan insufferable.
But not for the reasons that...
No, not for the reasons I should find it insufferable. I find it insufferable because he's just a boorish intellectual. I find that...
I think Manhattan's an excellent film.
I don't...
I mean, I haven't seen it for ages, but it has
a very beautiful opening sequence, actually.
With George
fireworks, Gershwin over the city. It's incredible. Like, that's the romance of New York is contained in.
Yeah, talk about romanticizing things.
Yeah. On that note, so this has been MoodTube, interrupted by pizza.
Next week we'll be reviewing A Couch in New York by Chantal Akerman,
and we'll have a special guest,
Daniel Neofitu.
Friend of the pod,
our regular third mic, will be popping in virtually to give his thoughts on The Couch in New York.
Yeah. So peace out.
Peace out.